Welcome to the creative community. I'm your host, David Starkey, and my guest this time is Joe Woodard. Joe, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to have you. You're a fabulous writer, and I love to read everything that you write, and you're also a musician, and we decided we're going to focus on the music aspect of Joe today.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, those of us in the media have heard about this album that you're doing, a wedding album, On This Day, and I was really intrigued by it. You sent me the selections, and it's a real beautiful album of acoustic guitar music. Can you tell us a little bit about the genesis?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like this is one part of my musical set of personalities that I haven't really recorded or performed with. But basically I started out with classical guitar, and in fact I still have the guitar that I had when I was 18,
Oh, wow.
which was a little bit ago. And so all through the years and decades I've written little pieces, solo guitar pieces, and fast forward to my daughter Claire was getting married in June, and we liked the guy, by the way. John
You can
Pemberton.
say that on TV. Yeah.
That's right. I'm not just saying that. So anyway, she's always been very supportive of whatever crazy music I'm doing, right. And she said, you know, she wanted to get me involved, and we agreed that I would pull out some of these sort of peaceful, noodly tunes of mine. Right. So I put them together and I rehearsed them, and then I played them at the reception of the wedding. Okay. And then the one tune, On This Day, which I actually played while walking her down the aisle.
Father of the Bride?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And so anyway.
Well, I was thinking, I one time was playing, I guess it was at maybe a wake, but that I was on the side while people were talking, and I remember thinking, nobody's really listening too much to what I'm doing. Did you have that feeling, or were people kind of gathered around?
No, and I really like that.
Yeah.
Because I played, you know, in my 20s, music was my income basically, right, and
right.
I played a lot of weddings,
right.
and top 40 gigs,
right.
and that's kind of a nice thing about weddings and events. You just kind of blend into the background.
Yeah, yeah. If someone wants to stop and look and listen.
Yeah, some people did,
yeah.
and others just milled around and drank.
Well, we have, before we started our interview, you recorded 3 pieces for us. So we're going to go take a look at the first one, On This Day. And again, this is the title track and the one that you played as you went down the aisle. So
great.
Let's take a look at that.
Okay, good.
Wow. So you were talking about you composed a lot of these pieces. You said noodling or whatever. I mean, tell me a little bit about the creative process that goes into the composition of a piece like the one we just heard.
Well, this one was maybe more melody driven than a lot of mine because they're more atmospheric or playing around with the chord progression.
Right.
You know, it's folk, but there's jazz influence and classical. I was a bad classical student. I kind of bailed out because I didn't have the discipline to really pursue that, but I know it's in me.
Yeah.
And I love classical music and I write about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that one was just, it kind of came out of me and not that long ago, maybe 5 years ago. And I always thought this would be good for a wedding or something, you know.
And sure enough, it was.
And there you go.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
all of these years later.
So are you hearing the entire piece in your head, or are you just starting to play with some chords and it kind of evolves from that direction?
Yeah, this one did come from that melody. And then the chords sort of fit in there. And maybe I do have this habit of putting too many chords in, but and this one I wanted to keep it more lyrical.
Right.
And no oddball chords in this one.
Well, we're going to listen to another piece from that album. But before we do that, I would like to ask you a little bit about your crazier stuff. And you're just talking about kind of melding all these different genres together, and you're also a lyricist, which we'll hear later on.
Mm-hmm.
When I listen to a Headless Household record, I feel like I've gone on a journey from Antarctica to the other side of the earth. You know, there's so much going on, and there's clearly, you know, there's some thought in terms of maybe the lyrics connecting and instrumentation, but it is a pretty weird journey.
It's true, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of what you guys are trying to do.
The whole evolution of that band was so bizarre. I mean, it started at Baudelaire's, which is an amazing club run by a poet, Claire Rabe.
Right.
And she was completely non-commercial, and she supported us in the beginning to pursue our craziest ideas. And it was much more improvisational in the very beginning.
Right.
So hence Headless, you know, there's no head, AKA melody. And then I started creeping in more of my songs. And at some point, we just realized the lack of a focus is our focus. You know, and we used
embraced that.
Yeah, we embraced it. We're hopelessly eclectic to the end.
Yeah.
And that was 1983 we started.
Wow.
And we made 9 albums, and I'm hoping to get back to it. It got derailed during the pandemic.
Yeah, like everything.
Yeah.
Well, I'm interested too about your journalism, because you write with such authority about all these different genres. You know, you see your stuff in Downbeat, and we read you in The Independent all the time.
Yeah.
Does that affect the music that you compose?
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've always, since I was a teenager, I've been listening to everything. Stockhausen and Miles Davis and the Monkees and you know, the Beatles are my gods.
Sure.
And they did that too. You know, they were wildly eclectic if you think
were.
about it.
Yeah.
Even moving into the avant-garde stuff they did on the White Album. So and then as my career developed, I was schizoid. You know, because I wrote about classical and a lot of jazz, but I love rock still and folk and pretty much everything. So that kind of feeds back, and sometimes I find myself stealing ideas. Like I'm working on a country album now, and I saw Charlie Crockett at the Arlington, which was amazing to me. And so I had some ideas that I'm going to steal from him. Oh, I shouldn't say that.
Absolutely. We'll cut that, guys.
Cut that out.
Well, before we go any further, let's go back and let's listen to Holidays, right?
Holidays.
Holidays.
Yes.
Okay.
You know that feeling?
Absolutely.
When you're in the holidays and you're in a daze.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, let's take a listen.
Great.
watching you, as a fellow guitar player, I'm really admiring a lot of the chords that you're playing and how you're able to span the neck so adeptly.
Thank you.
The next piece that we're going to listen to is from Goleta Electric.
Mm-hmm.
And now, are you a resident of Goleta?
I grew up on Pebble Hill Drive,
Okay.
which I always thought of it as Goleta, but I realized we're just shy of the city limit line.
So it's no Lita?
It's, well, Solita,
So
or so no SB.
no, it's
But I was related to Goleta.
Right. Well, but Goleta Electric is a place, right?
It was a place that I always loved looking at because I actually don't know what it was. I guess it was just
It
the
must have
electric
been,
company.
yeah, right.
And fortunately, I took that shot that became the cover right
Got that
before.
here,
Oh,
yeah.
there it is. Look at that font. How can you not
I
love
know,
that
that
font?
is a great font, isn't it?
Yeah,
It looks like a lot of things could happen in there that you don't want to tell people
That's
about.
true. It could be a front. But,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if someone is watching this who can tell me.
That's right, yeah.
But soon after I took that shot, they took the sign down. So,
Uh-huh.
and I always had that in my mind as a title.
Right.
You know, and of course, the irony is that it's almost all acoustic.
Right. But it's just an ironic title like that has got an ethos to it, right? It's like, I'm going to do something that is a little bit off balance and unexpected and quirky. Everything that image sort of draws up for us. We're going to hear Freedom in Kentfield, but before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about some of the other songs on the record?
I just wanted to mention on the Goleta up front, actually the only Goletan, I have a lot of guests who flew in parts just, through the internet.
Right.
But in the case of Zach Gill, he actually lives in Goleta.
Okay.
So he's the token Goletan on this album. And he was great. He played accordion on that Freedom in Kentfield,
Right.
and kind of a honky-tonk piano.
Right.
On a song called Pleasant Valley Monday.
Uh-huh.
So it's pretty all over the map. It's but I've came up with this genre faux folk because it's folk, but it's not really.
Right.
And so there's some, moody shoegazing kind of stuff, which I like,
Right.
and things that go further out.
When you're sort of casting the band for one of your projects, are you going by word of mouth? You've heard somebody play in a club. How did the people all get together on the record?
I've always had my ear open for musicians who might relate to what we're doing.
Right.
Headless Household had a lot of guests.
Right.
And this one was weird because, during the pandemic, I was pretty much shut out of work for like a year and a half. And that's when I learned how to do the home studio thing. So I have my own home studio. That's where both of these were recorded.
Right.
So a lot of friends just flew in parts, sometimes from their phone.
Right.
It was fascinating, and everyone was eager to do something, to fend off boredom.
And as you're self-producing the album, are you finding yourself, fanaticizing over little different moments, and I got to get rid of that last second, or
Totally.
Yeah,
it becomes very obsessive.
it does become
Takes- yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's listen to Freedom in Kentfield, and
Okay.
then we'll come back to the studio.
Great. Thank you.
We came to this world in a box sent from somewhere. We've gorged on a diet of weeds and such. a girls' club, occasional squabbles don't ruffle our feathers too much. We came to this room when we were much smaller, pecked at the ground and warmed by the pile. We knew we were loved by a strange looming tender of signature voices and smiles. Well, goodbye to the nest, good hello to the open field, to freedom and can't feel, freedom and can't feel, more still to come. There'll be more in, freedom in can't feel for now. We're feeders of food chains, feeders of love. We're feeders, our kinfolk are breeders. We don't yet relate to the fate of our future. We do what we do, no more grandiose a plan. Well, goodbye to the nest, good hello to the open field, freedom and can't feel, freedom and can't feel, more still to come. There'll be more in, freedom and can't feel for now. Well, goodbye to the nest, good hello to the open field, to freedom and can't feel, freedom and can't feel, there's more still to come. There'll be more in, freedom and can't feel, for freedom and can't feel, freedom and can't feel, more still to come. There'll be more in, freedom and can't feel for now. Thank you.
Okay, from Galita Electric. Well, Joe, we just have about 5 or 6 minutes left. And one of the things a music journalist does is cover music being performed. And so can you talk a little bit about what's it like to be back out there listening to people play live music?
It's amazing. It's like I was off to, well, this is overstating it, but I was off to a war and came back.
Right.
On a very small level.
Right.
I don't mean to diminish that, but yeah, it was so strange to not have live music in my life. And people were streaming shows.
Right, I remember
but
that, yeah.
I quickly got bored of that. Like, go away, screens. I want to get away from screens.
Right, yeah.
So when the live music started, I guess it was about 1.5 years ago maybe, it was just like this rush of that intense feeling I get from a good concert that's irreplaceable. You can't get it from listening to an album. You want to see live humans doing it.
Right.
In the time-honored tradition.
Well, yeah, I'm interested in that time-honored tradition because, you know, when people were streaming, you think, well, if you had a decent stereo, the sound wasn't too bad.
Yes.
You could sit there. They couldn't see you. You could get up and go to the bathroom or whatever. And it seemed like there were a lot of advantages initially, but then, as you say, it's obviously not the same thing. I mean, is it being around other people? Is that a big part of it?
I think so, yeah. Because it's like a primal thing that goes back millennia. you
Right.
know, the gathering of audiences.
Right.
And just the potential fallibility of musicians.
Yeah.
You know, they might fall down or make a mistake.
Right.
And now I love mistakes
Right.
because that proves that it's live.
Right. What are some of the concerts that you've been to recently that you would rave about?
Well, I love that Charlie Crockett.
Right.
And Luciana Souza did something in LA that I've been reviewing for the San Francisco Classical Voice,
Okay.
which actually covers LA and other places. And she did a great Brazilian concert with Vince Mendoza arrangements. That was amazing. Just the other night, Connor Hannock, the pianist who
Right.
from
Book of
music,
Sounds.
the Book of Sounds,
Yeah.
unbelievable. I heard
Yeah.
it in Ojai, and then he played it at Han Hall. It
Yeah.
blew my mind.
Yeah, it seems like everyone is talking about that all of a sudden now. What's so great about it? I haven't listened to it.
It's kind of like, and now the Goldberg variations are coming up with Jean Rondeau, the harpsichordist. It's kind of similar where you have to listen to the whole thing. It's 12 different parts. This German composer who also ushered in a lot of famous composers, John Cage and Lamont Young, blah, blah, blah. And you can hear the influence of different composers, and it somehow pulls you into his world, a world of sound, and you feel like you've been somewhere.
Oh, wow.
But I've heard it on Spotify, and it's not the same.
Well, in our last couple of minutes, are there any artists out there on record on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever that you would tell our viewers to say, hey, take a quick listen to this?
Well, I'm always so locked into things that I'm writing about.
Right.
So I'm just writing about Allison Russell, who's coming soon. She's amazing. She was in Poe Girl and Birds of Chicago, good Americana bands, but now she put out this amazing solo album that's getting a lot of critical acclaim for good reason. She explores her own kind of history of abuse and transcending that. And it's the transcendence that's really the subject of this album, and it's beautiful music. So that's one thing that's in my brain.
Well, in the last minute, you're talking about you got a new record that you'd like to put together. In a nutshell, what are you hoping to see in there?
Neoclassic country.
Okay.
That's my genre. But I'm trying to come up with something
And
pithier.
neoclassic is
like Charlie Crockett,
like
what,
Charlie
what
Crockett,
he's
okay.
doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd been planning this for a long time, but,
Right. Yeah.
and then I've got like 4 other albums I'm working. This is the danger of having a home studio.
That's right.
No one's going to stop
Yeah,
you.
that's right. Yeah. My wife stops me. So.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah.
Well, it has been a great pleasure to talk to you, to hear your music, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, and as a musician.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
The Creative Community is produced with a generous grant from the Diana and Simon Robb Foundation. The show is a co-production of TVSB and CAPS Media in Ventura. I'm your host, David Starkey, and we'll see you next time.